So in order to remove the causes of your lower back pain, we need to find out what are the major causes of lower back failure. Now the first one is fairly rare. It's a large impact. For example, you're on a skidoo and you go over a massive jump and you have a huge impact, which is just way too much for your spine. That's fairly rare to happen. The second one is repeated flexion of your lumbar spine. And the third one is sustained flexion. I'll go into these a little bit more. So think rounding your lower back. You see, because your spine doesn't like to have a lot of movement. And this is what happens when your back goes out. You see, every time you're sort of flexing and rounding your lower back, think of this stick as like your spine. If I keep doing this, or like a copper wire, if I continue to do this, it will weaken, and then finally it will snap. Well, your back doesn't exactly snap, but what happens is cumulative trauma of either repeated flexion or sustained flexion. And again, I'll go into this in a little more detail in a second. But just for the moment, think that that's what happens when you go to pick up that pencil or that cake of soap and you're laying flat out in the bed again with muscle relaxants, simply because it was the straw that broke the camel's back, if you like. It was just that last little trauma of cumulative traumas to your lower back, because your spine can only take so much of this bending and flexing. All right? So repeated flexion is, let's say you're bending to pick up things in your garden and you're rounding out this lower back. You've lost that inward curve, the lumbar curve that I have now, and I'm standing up and you're standing up straight. That inward curve is what we call neutral spine. But what happens when you get into trouble is when you start to round out that lower back and lose that curve. Okay? And you're repeatedly doing that, you're continually doing damage. So you think you're going to the garden, you're weeding, or you're picking things up, and over time, trauma after micro trauma, and this is what happens until finally your back can't take it anymore. Add to that sustained flexion, meaning once again you've rounded out, they've lost that curve. Think of yourself slouched in front of the TV or your computer, like this. Sitting out there, once again you see I've lost that inward curve. The lumbar curve is gone. So what is happening here? Let me tell you. When you lose that curve, think of it like this. When you've got that inward curve, your spine, think of my hands as your vertebrae. Okay? Imagine I've got a balloon between my hands. That represents your disc. What happens is when you do this, you flex the spine. Okay? You're flexing the spine. So imagine the vertebrae then do this. They flex. Now imagine if that balloon's here and I flex like that. What happens to the balloon? It bulges out this way, right? Well, that's representative of your disc, and that's pretty much what happens. The inside of the disc then migrates backwards. Do it for a little while, and that's when you'll get that back stiffness. Okay, sitting in bad position or leaning over into the garden, and then you get up and you just sort of bend backwards and be stiff. But if you do this long enough, you start to damage the soft tissues, and the disc will migrate further backwards, and then you can have really large back pain. If it then protrudes even further, it can start pressing on nerves, such as sciatica. So we need to stop doing this. We need to keep what is called neutral spine. So we're going to have to work on bending techniques, lifting techniques, sitting techniques. No more slouching. You need to feel like you're sitting tall, standing tall, walking tall.